Hi, welcome back. Today's book review is on Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I have full respect for the author. He has a Nobel Prize in economics. He's super intelligent, and he has defined some of the very popular concepts on how your brain works and the biases that exist. Now, what do I think of this book? I have a love and hate relationship with this book. First of all, it has 38 chapters. I know every single chapter has about 10 to 12 pages. I love the first part of the book as well as the last sections of the book. I also enjoyed some parts in the middle, but I will tell you now, some of the chapters got a little too nerdy. But if this is a topic that you really want to dive deep into, then you will absolutely love this reading. There is, however, no chance that an average person can finish all of this in one sitting. For me personally, it was even difficult to read multiple chapters in one sitting because every chapter gets you really thinking. Now, I bought this book when I was traveling. I cannot remember which airport it was from, but you can buy this from Amazon today at 24 Australian dollars. In this video, I'm going to cover my top 10 takeaways. I hope you enjoy. Let's start with an image. Now, I want you to look at this image. I'm sure very quickly you were able to think that this lady has dark hair, she's super angry, she's probably about to blow up and say very unkind words. That was very quick for you to think of, right? That was just intuitive. Another brain exercise. I want you to multiply 17 by 24. You probably struggled and started to panic. But the first takeaway is that the brain has two systems. The first system operates automatically and quickly with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. Whereas system 2 allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations. So what happened with our first brain exercise when you saw the image, straight away your brain just used system 1. Whereas with the second example, it needed system 2, and system 2 was responsible for doing that multiplication problem. The problem with system 1 is that it can be biased, and you will find out in the next takeaways what those biases are. Let's do another brain exercise. A bat and ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Now, I'm sure a number came to your mind. If it was 10 cents, then I know that that answer was intuitive, appealing, but wrong. Do the math and you will see. If the ball costs 10 cents, then the total cost would be $1.20. The correct answer is 5 cents. This is proof that your system 2 is lazy. If you did think that it was 5 cents, good on you for resisting the intuition and resisting system 1. Before we proceed to the next takeaway, I want to talk about a few interesting things about system 2. Studies have shown that people who are simultaneously challenged by demanding cognitive tasks and by a temptation are more likely to yield to that temptation. So imagine that you are asked to retain a list of 7 digits for a minute or two. You are told that remembering the digits is your top priority. While your attention is focused on the digits, you are offered a choice between 2 desserts, a sinful chocolate cake and a virtuous fruit salad. The evidence suggests that you would be more likely to select the tempting chocolate cake when your mind is loaded with digits. System 1 has more influence on behavior when System 2 is busy, and it has a sweet tooth. Another interesting theory of System 2 is that people who are cognitively busy are more likely to make selfish choices, use sexist language, and make superficial judgments in social situations. But really, another way of saying this is that controlling thoughts and behaviors is one of the tasks that System 2 performs. So make sure that System 2 is not busy when you're making decisions or when you're trying to control yourself. The other theory that I found interesting is the impact of glucose on System 2. The nervous system consumes more glucose than most other parts of the body, and effortful mental activity appears to be especially expensive in the currency of glucose. When you are actively involved in difficult cognitive reasoning or engaged in a task that requires self-control, your blood glucose level drops. This takes me back to when I was still a student at Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand, and I did computer science. Every time I had to do a lot of programming or I would visit the labs, my go-to buddy is a Snickers chocolate bar. So that was my body telling me that I needed more glucose and sugar in the brain. And you know what's funny? I was just recording. This is totally unplanned, I swear to God. I've got a Tim Tams on my desk. So there you go. Old habits die hard. This next one is a bias that exists in System 1, and this is the science of availability. It really is the process of judging frequency of something by the ease with which instances come to mind. So for example, if someone asks you, do you think there's a lot of people who divorce after the age of 60? Then your answer to that is probably going to be biased based on instances that you know of that exist in your brain. So if you've got friends who are over 60 that have divorced, then you might say, yes, that group of people is large. It's as similar as, my friends overseas, they're like, oh, I don't want to go to Australia because there's so many spiders and snakes. And I'm like, I've been in Australia for 6.5 years and I've only seen one snake. In a zoo. So another example is in Brisbane, it floods. It doesn't flood every year. It floods maybe once in 5 to 7 years. And so right after a flood, families move higher altitude suburbs. But then, years pass and people just forget and they start building again on the ground. And then a few years later, they'll be flooded and impacted again. This was a story that a customer of mine who lives in Brisbane tells me. It's just, people in Brisbane just forget. Again, it's the science of availability. And I think people can use this to their advantage. Surround yourselves with people who you want to be, who you want to learn from. Work for a company where your workmates will help you to be better. But equally know that this is a System 1 bias and that you need to engage your System 2 for higher vigilance. Now, I want to highlight one of the things that I learned from this book, and it's something that stuck with me, which is called WYSIWYG. If there's WYSIWYG, this is about WYSIWYG, and it stands for what you see is all there is. It's very similar to the availability bias that we spoke about earlier, and this is quite scary. This is why a lot of people jump into conclusions. Unfortunately, one of the biases that exists in System 1 in our brain is that we prefer causal explanations over mere statistics. We prefer stories that are simple. Here's a brain exercise. A cab was involved in a hit-and-run accident at night. 2 cab companies, the green and the blue, operate in the city. You're given the following data. 85% of the cabs in the city are green and 15% are blue. A witness identified the cab as blue. The court tested the reliability of the witness under the circumstances that existed on the night of the accident and concluded that the witness correctly identified each of the 2 colors 80% of the time and failed 20% of the time. What is the probability that the cab involved in the accident was blue rather than green? Well, you probably would say the answer is 80% because the witness succeeded identifying colors 80% of the time. The problem there is that a lot of people forgot the base rate. And the base rate here is that forgetting the witness, there's 85% of taxis that operate in the city that are green, only 15% are blue. So if you just look at the base rate, it's actually just 15% chance. But the correct answer, if you were to use the Bayesian inference, that would be 41%. Let's just say, if we were to tweak the data a little bit, you're given the following data. The 2 companies operate the same number of cabs, right? 50-50. But green cabs are involved in 85% of the accidents. The information about the witness is as in the previous version. Now, the author says that the 2 versions of the problem are mathematically indistinguishable. However, they are psychologically quite different. They have a very different impact to the brain. The first version had no causal story. It literally was just a statistic that 85% of the Cabs that operate are green and 15% are blue. So the brain would typically just jump to the second statistic, which is 80% of the time the witness would just identify green versus blue. Whereas in the second story, it was 50-50 number of cabs, but green cabs are involved in 85% of accidents. That is 5 times more. And so therefore the brain comes up with a story that maybe the green drivers are a collection of reckless madmen. Again, causal stories trump statistics, very scary. The author also covers a lot of things that are very similar, such as overconfidence, the illusion of validity, intuition versus formula. I'm not going to cover all of these things, but again, it comes back to how our brain is wired to prefer stories over just mere numbers. The author argues that there is regression everywhere and that it all converges to the mean. I want to start with my own personal story. Back in 2021, our sales team blew our numbers out of the water. All the sales team got to go to Hawaii, President's Club, celebrated. We hit 200%, 250% of the target. Everyone was celebrating. This was a really good sales year. The next year, the company has increased the sales target by 40%. Guess what happened the following year? Our sales performance was super, super bad. Did anyone actually think that we would produce higher than that? I think this is what the author is challenging. If you had an extremely positive result, then there's a good chance that the next result is going to be lower than what you achieved. Similarly, if you had an extremely negative result, then there's a good chance that the next round will be a better one. So extremely taller parents will have a good chance that their children are going to be shorter. Similarly, if they have shorter parents, then there's a good chance that their kids are going to be taller. This is why this pattern is called regression to the mean. It was actually discovered by Sir Francis Galton, a half-cousin of Charles Darwin. And this is why you would sympathize with his struggle with the concept of regression. When it comes to a criminal or civil trial, David Friedman, the statistician, says that the side that must explain regression to the jury will lose the case. Why is it so hard? The main reason for the difficulty is a recurrent theme of this book. Our mind is strongly biased toward causal explanations and does not deal well with mere statistics. I'm sure you would have come across projects that have been delivered over time and over budget. The author covers a few examples, such as the Scottish Parliament building, where it was initially meant to be a 40 million euro project, became a 431 million euro project. In a 2005 study examined real projects undertaken worldwide, in more than 90% of the use cases, the average cost overrun was 45%. Now, I'm going to add to that list of examples the Sydney Opera House here in Australia. Was meant to be just a $7 million project over 4 years, became a $102 million project over 14 years. Why does this happen? So the author and his close friend Amos coined this the planning fallacy. Experts in a project or forecasters in the project often take the inside view, which is information that is in front of them. What we learned about earlier as Wizziati, what you see is all there is. So they base their planning on their specific circumstances and search for evidence based on their own experiences. How does one mitigate the planning fallacy? Well, you need to balance the inside view with the outside view. There's a Danish planning expert that said forecasters need to use a large database that provides information on both plans and outcomes for hundreds of projects all over the world. One that can provide statistical information about likely overruns of cost and time. Essentially, you can mitigate the Wizziati by taking the outside view. Well, I used to be in software delivery where time and cost estimation was normal. However, one thing that we underestimated was the power of t-shirt sizing. It's very similar to taking the outside view. While we still needed to estimate every single project, we also had to run it past the by and large thinking. Like compared to other projects we delivered in the past, does this estimate sound right? Let's say you are offered a gamble on the toss of a coin. If the coin shows tails, you lose $100. If the coin shows heads, you win $150. Would you take part in the gamble? Now, to make this choice, you must balance the psychological benefit of getting $150 against the psychological cost of losing $100. How do we feel about that? Like, what if it was winning $1,500 against losing $1,000? Obviously, the expected value of the gamble is positive because we stand to gain more than we can lose, but we probably dislike it. Apparently, most people do. This is what the author means by saying losses loom larger than gains, and that people are generally loss averse, even including animals. In the world of territorial animals, this principle explains the success of defenders. A biologist observed that when a territory holder is challenged by a rival, the owner almost always wins the contest, usually within a matter of seconds. If you've read the book 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson, you'll know that in his first chapter, he talks about exactly this through lobsters. Now, this makes so much sense to me. Like, if there was only one takeaway or two takeaways from this book, this would be one of them. In fact, I've already applied this in my job. A year ago, we released a new version of our software. For some reason, our customers have been postponing upgrading to that new version of the software. I looked at the global marketing materials. We focused on the gains as opposed to the losses. Now, having read this book, I tried rewording some of the content in the deck, but instead of talking about better performance, more modern UI, latest technology, and so on, I rewrote it to, if they stayed on the current version, they will have increased costs because of increased support. They will be opening it up to more security risks and breaches by not applying the latest updates. And the lifespan of the software will be shortened, and the talent pool that can support this systems is going to grow smaller. There is a very different impact to the brain. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the sunk cost fallacy, but for those who do not, here's a thought exercise. Two avid sports fans planned to travel 40 miles to see a basketball game. One of them paid for his ticket. The other was on his way to purchase a ticket when he got one free from a friend. A blizzard is announced for the night of the game. Which of the two ticket holders is more likely to brave the blizzard to see the game? The answer is immediate. We know that the fan who paid for her ticket is more likely to drive. System 1's automatic thinking knows that if they miss the game, they will close on a more negative balance. Not only is the fan deprived of the game, she is also out of pocket. However, someone who has a more disciplined system 2, the author argues, would realize that the ticket has already been paid for and cannot be returned. Its cost is sunk, and she would not care whether she had bought the ticket to the game or got it from a friend. Sunk cost fallacy keeps people for too long in their jobs, unhappy marriages, losing stocks, and unpromising research projects. I have been in a losing project in a past life where no one could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but the company still kept pouring money into it. Now, I had already left the company when they finally made a decision, but it took them 4 years and a few $1 million later to abandon the project altogether. Interesting title. Now we're at the end of the video, and if you watch my previous ones, I usually keep the last one a mystery. The clue, however, can be found in chapter 5 of the book called The Two Selves. Everyone has two versions of themselves, the remembering one and the experiencing one, and one of them is a stranger to the other. But if you've made all the way to this part of the video, thank you for listening. While the title is Thinking Fast and Slow, at the back of the book, a reviewer has said, buy it fast, read it slowly. It will change the way you think. I cannot agree more. I honestly, however, had to push myself quite a number of times to complete this reading. An excellent read, but not the easiest one because it got too academic at times. But deep respect for the author, Daniel Kahneman. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And for those of you who are still watching, you deserve a chocolate bar. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and buy a copy of the book using the link below in the comments. Till the next book review.